All right, so you know how this works by now, right? You send us these sources, and then we kind of just take a deep dive into them and try to pull out some of the things that really, um, stick with us.
Yeah, it's all about finding those core insights, those golden nuggets, right?
Absolutely. And the listener today sent in some pretty um, heavy stuff. I mean, we're talking relationships, trauma, and that fundamental human need to be seen and believed.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. And I think, looking at Bruce's experiences, particularly through the lens of episode 12 marriage.pdf, that's going to be our main focus today.
Right. And then using those developing theme guides from the earlier episodes,
Yeah.
episodes 1 to 11, I think that's going to give us a good foundation, a solid understanding of kind of what he's been through up until this point.
Definitely. And, we also have the full episode takeaways complete.pdf, which provides even more detail. But we're really going to hone in on this period of Bruce's life, his marriage to Elay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a story with a lot of layers, right? Starting with that whole idea of, how his past trauma and wrongful conviction play into his expectations for this relationship. What's he even looking for here?
Exactly. And then there's that added layer of what it means for him to finally find someone who actually believes him. Because remember, he's been doubted, he's been misrepresented for so long.
So much. Yeah.
And it's not a straightforward love story either. There are some unexpected turns and twists that really make you think about the complexities of relationships in general.
So where do we even begin? I guess we start with Bruce entering into this marriage with Ali, and it's clear right off the bat that this isn't like a typical rom-com kind of story,
Not at all.
It's not about fireworks and, happily ever after. Bruce himself describes it as this desperate desire for connection.
Yeah, and that wording is so telling, isn't it? I mean, it's not about finding happiness in the traditional sense, right?
Yeah.
It's something deeper. It's this longing to be seen, to be understood.
Geared for, yeah.
Exactly. And you have to remember the context here. I mean, Bruce's life has been marked by so much trauma, violence, betrayal, a justice system that completely failed him.
As we saw in the developing theme guide, right?
Yeah, it's all there. And it's understandable that this would lead to what we call toxic shame.
Which essentially means that
It's this really deeply ingrained feeling of being inherently flawed and unworthy. And, he's internalized this false conviction. It's become a part of him to the point where he doesn't believe he deserves love.
because of what he's been through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when Ailey enters the picture, it's really significant.
Huge.
And Bruce sums it up perfectly when he says, she didn't just see me, she believed me. And that changed everything.
I mean, that's such a simple statement, right? But it's so powerful, especially for someone who has been doubted and disbelieved for so long.
It speaks volumes about the transformative nature of belief and the impact it can have on someone's life, especially after experiencing the kind of trauma that Bruce has.
And what I find really interesting is that their connection started through poetry, of all things.
It's true. They met through this word salad magazine they were both contributing to.
So it's this shared space of vulnerability and self-expression right from the beginning.
Absolutely. And then you have this whole scenario with the hypothetical marriage question, which, I mean, honestly, it's almost too good to be true.
Yeah, it's kind of wild.
So Bruce asks Ali this question about marriage, just kind of hypothetically, and she, being from Iran, takes it completely literally.
Because,
Well, in Iranian culture, I mean, dating isn't really a thing, and a woman wouldn't typically leave the country unless it was for marriage.
this was a complete cultural difference, right?
Yeah, and I think it speaks to her earnestness, too. She was genuinely open to the idea.
And for Bruce, I mean, underneath all of this is this deep vulnerability. He admits he needed to believe that someone could want him, even knowing the truth about his past.
Right. He lays it all out there, the false conviction, the injustice he faced, and she accepts it without question.
Doesn't need proof or anything.
Nothing. It's just pure belief.
Which, coming from someone across the globe, I mean, that must have felt like a lifeline to him.
I can only imagine, and psychologically, this is huge for Bruce.
Yeah.
I mean, he's carrying this weight of this false accusation, and suddenly there's someone willing to commit to him based solely on his word.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So they embark on this long-distance relationship, video calls, chats across continents, and Bruce starts to identify these match points.
What are match points exactly?
It's his term for these moments of connection.
Okay.
These things they have in common, these shared experiences that kind of fuel his hope for the future of the relationship.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah.
And then the logistics of them even meeting. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
They had to go to Turkey, right?
Ankara specifically. It was the only place they could legally get married.
So they're essentially meeting in person for the first time, right before their wedding.
It's a huge leap of faith, fueled by that desperation we talked about, that need to believe in something.
Yeah. And Bruce even reflects later on whether he actually believed in love or if he just needed to believe in something again.
Yeah, he sees it as a second chance, but one that he feels he shouldn't have needed.
That's a poignant thought, right?
It really highlights the lasting impact of the injustice he faced. This idea that he needed a second chance because of something that wasn't his fault.
And then right after this, this huge moment of hope, tragedy strikes.
Yeah, his best friend Thomas dies suddenly.
And Thomas sounds like he was such an important figure in Bruce's life, someone who had been there for him for decades.
A constant, a steady presence.
The kind of non-judgmental support he really needed after everything he'd gone through, and to lose him so abruptly right after finding this new hope with Ailey, it's just devastating.
And it gets even more complicated because Bruce actually misses Thomas's funeral.
Why is that?
He turns to alcohol to cope with the grief, and he ends up unable to attend the funeral. And he talks about this intense shame surrounding that decision. He sees it as self-inflicted, and it really deepens the wound.
It's like a double loss in a way.
Absolutely. And with Thomas gone, something else starts to shift. For Bruce, his connection to Wilmington starts to fade.
Wilmington was...
It was his home. It was his anchor to a better life before the false conviction, before all the loss and injustice.
The people there remembered a different version of him, right?
Exactly. The Bruce, before all of this happened, with Thomas gone, is like another piece of that past is slipping away.
And all of this is happening as he's trying to build this new life with Ailey.
It's a lot to process.
So then Ailey arrives in the U.S. on her visa, and the honeymoon period, if you can even call it that, kind of comes crashing down.
Right. The reality of their situation sets in.
Ailey wants to be a doctor, which is incredible, but it also means going through these really demanding USMLE exams while adjusting to a whole new culture and language.
It's a lot of pressure.
And on top of that, Bruce is living on Social Security disability.
Right. He's supplementing his income with contract work, but it's not stable.
And he was upfront with Ailey about his finances from the start.
He was, but the day-to-day reality of trying to make ends meet while also having sponsored her immigration, it's a tough situation.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And as Ailey is focusing on her studies, she starts to withdraw, and Bruce begins to feel invisible.
Like he's not really there?
They're in the same house, but they're not connecting, and unspoken resentments start to build.
Maybe Ailey had different expectations. Maybe she was expecting more financial stability.
Possibly. And on Bruce's side, he's probably craving emotional support and understanding, which he's not getting.
So communication breaks down and silence fills the space between them.
It's a classic case of unmet expectations, really.
And it happens all the time in relationships, right?
Unfortunately. Yeah, and it often comes down to those unspoken assumptions about roles and responsibilities.
Like maybe Ailey had a more traditional view of marriage.
Where the husband is the primary provider, and Bruce, having been through so much, is probably looking for something different.
Deeper emotional connection?
Exactly. And when those fundamental needs aren't met, the relationship starts to crumble.
And the end comes when Bruce tells Janetta that he doesn't think he loves Ailey.
And that sets off this chain of events that honestly sounds almost unbelievable.
What happens?
Ailey leaves, and then there's this whole situation with a domestic violence protection order.
Which is just...
It's a really stark example of how quickly things can escalate and how easily misunderstandings can lead to these serious legal consequences.
And the thing that really stands out to me is Ailey's anger. She's not just angry at Bruce, she's angry at the system, at Bruce's lawyer.
Yeah, and there's even this mention of the Trump Muslim ban in the court documents.
Wow.
It's presented as a contributing factor to Ailey's distress, which is fascinating because it shows how these larger political and social events can have these unexpected personal repercussions.
It adds another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation.
Definitely.
And for Bruce, given his history of being falsely accused, this protection order must have been incredibly painful.
He talks about how it looks, this label of being a potential threat, especially considering his past.
It's like history repeating itself in a way.
Unfortunately, yeah. But then you have this detail that Ellie actually invited him to visit.
So there's clearly not this genuine fear there, despite the legal action. It's confusing.
It is. It really highlights the complex dynamics at play, and ultimately their marriage ends in divorce.
So not only is Bruce dealing with the emotional fallout of the relationship ending, but he's also experiencing these resurfacing traumas from his past.
He starts having flashbacks and nightmares related to some pretty disturbing experiences.
Like what specifically?
He mentions his relationship with a prison guard, which was clearly inappropriate, and then these unsettling interactions with Kathy and her multiple personalities.
Multiple personalities, that's...
It's a whole other layer of complexity to their relationship, and it's clear that these memories are intruding on his present life.
affecting his ability to connect with Ailey.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder that trauma doesn't just disappear. It can have a profound impact on our capacity for intimacy and connection.
So this leads him to finally seek out trauma therapy, right?
Yeah, he had tried traditional talk therapy before, but it wasn't helpful.
Which is unfortunately common for people who have experienced complex trauma.
It is, but his experience with EMDR seems to be a turning point.
What's EMDR again?
It stands for eye movement, desensitization,
Yeah.
and reprocessing. It's a technique that helps the brain reprocess traumatic memories in a way that reduces their emotional intensity.
So it's not about forgetting the memories, it's about changing how they affect you.
That's a good way to put it. And Bruce's therapist, Andrea Trimel, she really focuses on these grounding techniques.
Which are...
They're these simple exercises you can do to bring yourself back to the present moment, to kind of ground yourself when you're feeling overwhelmed.
I see.
And through EMDR, Bruce starts to confront these painful memories of his arrests, the interrogation, the betrayal, the loss, the dehumanization of jail.
Things he had been suppressing for years.
He talks about this emotional numbing, this dissociation he experienced as a way to cope.
Like a survival mechanism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And through therapy, he starts to reclaim his emotions, even anger.
Not as rage, but as a form of grief.
Right. It's about allowing himself to feel, again, even the painful stuff.
And he uses these resources during therapy.
Yeah, these are positive memories of loved ones, even fictional characters like Jessica Jones and Buffy.
He draws strength from them.
They provide a sense of protection as he revisits these traumatic memories.
It's pretty amazing how the mind can find resilience in those unexpected places.
It is. But even with all of this therapeutic work, the toxic shame persists.
That deep-seated feeling of being unworthy.
It lingers. And, despite the fact that his marriage ended, the belief that Ely initially showed him had a profound impact.
She was the first person to truly see him and believe him.
And that's something he carries with him.
But there's still this fear, this worry that another chance at love might not be possible because of his past.
Because of the label he was given.
It brings us back to that question he asks, what does healing even mean when the label of perpetrator remains?
It's a powerful question. And it speaks to the limitations of therapy when you're dealing with these external realities.
The social stigma, the lasting impact of a wrongful conviction.
It makes you think about the societal barriers that can impede healing, even when someone is actively trying to move forward.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Bruce's story, I think we're left with a lot to think about.
Yeah.
We see how complex it is to build a relationship when there's so much trauma in the past.
Yeah, and how transformative belief can be, but also how it's not always enough.
Sometimes even the strongest connection can't overcome the challenges of life.
And I think most importantly, we see how past injustices can have these lasting impacts on relationships and self-perception.
Even when someone is dedicated to healing.
Our listener wanted to understand these experiences, and Bruce's story gives us such a nuanced and often heartbreaking perspective.
It's a story about vulnerability and resilience.
And it makes us think about how the past shapes our ability to connect and believe in the future, even when genuine connection is offered.
Really powerful stuff.
It really highlights the ongoing nature of healing after trauma and injustice.
Well said. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
My pleasure.
Lots to ponder, for
Yeah.
sure.